I'm not a big fan of the strategic reserve strategy. I don't know why every Bitcoiner is so excited about that. We have a unique opportunity here. Like, the plan is to figure out an implementation plan, to develop an implementation plan by the end of Q1 next year that we can roll out come May with basically how do you get rid of the central bank? How do you replace the Surinamese dollar with Bitcoin? How do you separate money from state? How do you? Well, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. My company's almost bankrupt, standing up against corruption in this country. The only reason my companies are still alive is thanks to Bitcoin because I was able to. It cost us almost $250,000 a year to keep that live. I got offered 10 million in a grant by Hedera last year. 10 million in a grant. But I was adamant about staying Bitcoin only. Well, to be completely honest, and I don't see that same opportunity. I don't see that same conviction in El Salvador. Like, the guy's not a Bitcoiner. I think Max and Stacy do great marketing, and Bukele is great at marketing. Maybe there is some long-term strategy that he has to follow, and maybe his.
So I'm pretty happy to welcome a return guest, the next potential Bitcoin president of Suriname. Maya, how are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there.
Well, we were talking about some of the challenges of Bitcoin adoption before we hit record today. And I think a nice place to start this conversation would be talking about what happened literally this week in El Salvador. There's a little bit of confusion with Bukele supposedly bending the knee to the IMF to get this $1.3 billion of funding. Maya, I'd love your thoughts on the whole topic.
Well, to be completely honest, what did people expect? It's heavily dependent on the US dollar. It's their main currency. Suriname to be on a Bitcoin standard about, I think, a decade ago. And when I started lobbying for it, yeah, it was a while back. And when I started lobbying for it, Bitcoin wasn't really that mainstream. Was pretty bashed on in mainstream media. And I went to Consensus to meet the admins of Whirlpool. There's this toxic maxi group. We had like Charlie Shrem in there, Phil Potter, early Bitfinex days. And they would literally come and do Bitfinex announcements in the group chat. You had people from Kraken and staff from all the companies in there. So I went to meet the admins. And, I thought these guys know all the whales and these are all the Bitcoiners. They know all the core devs. And like Samson was in there. Everybody basically from early days was in there. Um, Went to meet them, had dinner, started lobbying for putting Suriname on a Bitcoin standard. Um, and it wasn't, yeah, the term Bitcoin standard wasn't a thing back then. But basically replacing our currency with Bitcoin and building that system that Satoshi um, developed this for, to basically end corruption and centralization. The problem that was created by greed in our markets and our capital markets. Um, it's not just capital markets. It's you can see it in tech too. It's greed is a disease, a cancer on society, right? And I saw Bitcoin as a cure and a cure for most of the problems that we face here in my country, and I've faced personally in my life. My dad was murdered because of corruption. My entire childhood was basically first wanting to be a lawyer so I could save my family and my dad. And after he was murdered, um, yeah, Daniel says this really well. Like, for me, it's not about number go up. It's not about money. It's not about power. It's not about fame. It's about, a legacy, and that he didn't die in vain. And I see it until today, even 20 plus years later, like things just have just gotten worse. And you can see what corruption is doing to our country. So I saw Bitcoin as a cure, as a solution to save it. And as ever since I was a kid, I did that. That is what I was dreaming about, and that is why my friends said I always needed to become president of this country, and why they believe in me, and why they've supported me as a team for the last 21 years with the company. So I went to Lobby, and I started out with Alpha Point because I thought we don't have a developed capital market, so we can build it from scratch and build that system, right? Build something new, and that's how you Trojan horse it into the entire economy. I thought that's a way to get Bitcoin in there, to have Bitcoin on the exchange, because I hadn't figured out the mechanism yet on how to have stocks issued on Bitcoin. And that's where I met Alpha Point for the first time. Is where the conversation got started. They're an exchange technology service provider. They had white label exchange software, and they were the biggest one in the space. They had a big booth at Consensus. And coincidentally, Alpha Point is the same company that did Chivo Wallet in El Salvador. So we started working with them, and I don't know, they are shitcoiners, right? They're Wall Street guys. They're fiat Wall Street guys, and it cost us, yeah, almost $250,000 a year to keep that live. And that was my that was what I'd spend my entire life building and saving with my companies. And we uh, we kept the exchange live. We were very close to launching, and it was costly. I mean, it's a sacrifice. We didn't want to launch with shit coins. We had Ethereum and Litecoin, and I think ETH and Litecoin built in there, or integrated for, like, when we thought, this is gonna cost us and we're gonna go into bankruptcy. Like, maybe we should just launch with as a shitcoin exchange, like Bitfinex and the others were. There weren't many exchanges at that time, and we didn't, and it did cost us. Binance wanted to buy us. We were in negotiations with Binance too, but that didn't feel right either. It felt
Mm.
like my country was going to be shitcoin central too, and you could never reverse that. Um, so we didn't, and I stayed diligent, stayed the same, stayed steadfast, and I don't see that same opportunity. I don't see that same conviction in El Salvador. Like, it's a dollarized economy, you know. Like, how much inflation do they actually feel? Same as the U.S. So you don't have heavy inflation like you do in the rest of Latin America. You don't have what we have here, and the guy's not a Bitcoiner. Like, I think Max and Stacy do great marketing, and Bukele is great at marketing. And I mean, respect for the guy. He did change it from the murder capital of the world to what it is today. And maybe there is some long term strategy that he has to follow. And maybe his influence in geopolitics is bigger than what we have here. We're pretty isolated. The world doesn't really care about us. Um, so maybe he's facing different challenges, but I don't know. I didn't expect much else. Like with the Chivo wallet, you could already see like the approach, so you can already see where the priorities lie. I'm not a big fan of the strategic reserve strategy. I don't know why every Bitcoiner is so excited about that. Like in the Genesis block, Satoshi had Chancellor on the brink of second bailouts for banks, right? And we're just giving them more munition, or you're just basically empowering central banks, right? They're making their central, like their reserve, that centralized system stronger with Bitcoin. So it's great for number go up, but it's not. Um, in any case, like it doesn't interest me. I share it, for example, on Facebook because that's what the central bank in my country looks at. They like to check my Facebook, and the governor and the deputy governor are on there, so they see it. So I like to throw it in their face from time to time, but that's not what I got into this for. That's not what I thought that Bitcoin was for, and I don't know. I've been very disappointed in this space and then the people and the players in the space. Like I met Max and Stacy for the first time. Um, I think it was Blockchain Week in Miami, or I don't even remember the name of the conference. It was a blockchain conference early days, like 2017 or 18 or something. And we were both being interviewed by CNBC by Rand Nooner.
Mm.
And he did the tearing of the paper thing, like sorry, paper money.
Yeah.
I just call it paper. I forget it's money. Um,
Well, it's not money, you're right.
yeah, and I was such a big fan. And then I met Stacy in El Salvador in 2021 because when I saw that they made it legal tender, I'd been lobbying for it, like with Alpha Point. Like, how do we build this system? Like, how do we build this exchange on Bitcoin? And how do we build this new system? And we have this market where you can actually do it. Like an entire part of our economy is missing. 38% of GDP should be actively, invested, traded. Um, Resource allocation is there's no proper resource allocation in our country because you can't um, diversify away from the currency aside from US dollar or euros. And in El Salvador, when we were introduced, she said, get elected. So, yeah, then here we are, 3.5 years later, 4.5 years, 3.5 years later. Um, and then in like last year, I got started again um, in the industry. And then you get confronted with reality, like how things actually are and where the incentives really are. And a lot is really, really, really fiat.
Tell us which
So
parts of that are fiat.
which parts are fiat?
Yeah.
Like staying a Bitcoin company or being a Bitcoin only company, for example, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life.
Mm.
My company's almost bankrupt, standing up against corruption in this country. The only reason my companies are still alive is thanks to Bitcoin because I was able to put my Bitcoin on BlockFi, and that's also how I lost it. But put my Bitcoin on BlockFi and get a loan to be able to keep my companies alive. And I got an investor from Lugano who basically just, took me under his wing and helped me to help my company survive. Otherwise, they would have been bankrupt already. Because you get boycotted and the economy tanked completely thanks to corruption as well. And during all this, you stay Bitcoin only because toxic maxi, like losing relationships, missing birthdays, missing everything, working your ass off. It takes extra, you know, because you don't have the same funds that shitcoin companies do. That's one. And two, like I got offered 10 million in a grant by Hedera last year. 10 million in a grant. That's free money, non-dilutive. Could have taken it and built on Hedera and built on Bitcoin and still have enough funds to fund staff, the whole business, and any license or whatever we wanted. But I was adamant about staying Bitcoin only, and I lost the mentor, a friend. He was chairman, my professor from Oxford. He was chairman of the company, and he basically just he left because he didn't agree. He said he thought I should have taken the money, and he thought I should have like acted like a startup and then built quick and move fast. And I was adamant about it being Bitcoin only, and it's been a struggle. Like I didn't take salary for a year. I only got a salary like 2 or 3 months ago, and that's just because the team saw that I was burning out and that I was frustrated, and it was Uncle Rockstar that said like, Maya, you need to start taking a salary because I wanted to extend runway, right? There's a limited amount of VCs who we align with in terms of ideology, being Bitcoin only. There's not many VCs, and VCs like to fund. I don't like. I don't get it either. Like I don't get why they only fund certain wallets and why they fund certain things and don't fund others. Because to me, like for a lot of them, the business model doesn't even make sense, but they get millions of dollars, right? Like there's no way in hell they're going to make revenue or that the business is even going to be successful. So a lot of Bitcoin companies aren't really sustainable. They need constant funding. And we built the company in a way where it would be self-sustainable, but we do need to get some funding. But there are a lot of gatekeepers, um, and there's a lot of nepotism. There are a lot of people that only help their friends or that act like children. Basically like this is high school, and if I don't like you, then I don't really care about adoption at all. And that's not just dataless, that's the circular economy too. Like for longer than a year we didn't get any funding. We got a little bit of funding on geyser fund. Like thank fucking god for geyser fund. If geyser fund did not exist, most likely I wouldn't not have gotten anything off of the ground, because I was putting all of my own money into it, until like Bitcoin Beach stepped in. Um, and that was a few months ago, right before the conference. Literally, like everything I earn um, goes back into to adoption, and we missed so many opportunities for actual adoption. Like they had at some of the big conferences, they have the POSs and NFC cards, and they're doing it for big people who are Bitcoiners already. We can have 40,000 people here. We have 80 events. There's so many events that we could have done since January that want to use the NFC cards to replace coins, because we don't have the payment systems that you have in other developed economies. You don't have the payment infrastructure they have in El Salvador. Um, but it's like if there's no fiat to be made, they don't care. So that's when it's nonprofit. And that's ironic, right? It's supposed to be nonprofit, so you're supposed to be donating or supporting or sponsoring because you care about adoption and you invest um, into circular economies for adoption. The solar projects, for example, we've been working on that for a year and a half. Well, energy in rural villages. That it has a business case actually, but you need to invest to be a power provider and create a grid for 5 megawatts, and then you have to add a mining component so we can have a gridless here. We have the funding mechanism for it. Same to the volcano bond in El Salvador, but I don't know. And I guess the industry is small and everybody's only focused on their own bottom line or their own, the things they're busy with. And I think a lot of people are forgetting the revolution. Like it's almost like it's like people are keyboard warriors on Twitter. We got zero support from the Nostr community, which is also a shame because we had to downscale a lot. We didn't have the just we didn't have the people, right? It wasn't about money. It was about having people and people with the tech skills to be able to. Luckily, Calvadev came so he could give a presentation, but we didn't get to roll out at the events as we wanted to, and it's it gets I get lost in my train of thought. It's just a lot of fucking frustration, to be honest. You think that people would care about actual adoption, right? And the thing is you innovate in these environments, right? You innovate in Africa, you innovate here where there is no financial infrastructure, and that's how you get the solutions that work everywhere. And somehow, like even like Ben and Helen came down in March, I think, from Gen 3, and she texted me from I think it was the Bitcoin conference in Africa, and she was surprised by, how underdeveloped we are in comparison.
Mm.
Like it was surprising. Um, and you have this opportunity for actual people to use it as it was supposed to, and it's a matter of support. It's not really it's not all about money, right? It's mainly like tech support. um I don't know. I think people expect me to either do everything, or they think I'm loaded or something, or rich, I don't know, or that I'm very very much I think over fun. I don't know what, I don't understand it, to be honest. Or maybe people don't like me, but I mean, even if you don't like me, send your own fucking staff down here, right?
Mhm.
Send someone here and have them do the thing. I mean, the opportunity in Suriname is it's it's one of the few, if not the only country in the world that is left where it's isolated enough, and the environment, the politics, the frustration, the corruption, the people, the size, the agility, like all of the circumstances and all of the pieces are already in place. I mean, I've been working on it for almost a decade, right? It's not something that just happened overnight.
Mm.
And you're fighting for the U.S. With 375 million people and a legacy system that is, gonna take a while to tackle, and we can create a shift here that is actually, that you, yeah, I don't even want to call it utopia. It's that it's what we all got into this for. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should just give you the actual updates on some of the positive stuff going on here. We have a team of Austrian economists, libertarians, global experts, the best minds in the world. We have Philip Bagus on the steering committee. Rahim, who you probably know, also the last Austrian economist.
Mm.
Rahim has become a good friend as well. We have David Howden, Per Byland, um, Patrick Myers. I hope I'm not raping his name. Samuel Coleman. Samuel's a Swiss parliamentarian. He's also on board. Yeah, we have an entire list, and we're getting more and more people on board. Some of the best minds in the world, advisors of Bukele, advisors of Millet, advisors of Trump. You know, people that have the same skills, and we have a unique opportunity here. Like the plan in the transformation commission or innovation commission, as I like to call it, because I think that distinguishes the team better here, um, is to figure out an implementation plan, to develop an implementation plan by the end of Q1 next year that we can roll out come May with basically how do you get rid of the central bank? How do you replace the Surinamese dollar with Bitcoin? How do you separate money from state? How do you shrink the government from 17 ministries to six? How
Mm.
do you downsize and downscale government and transition? 68,000 people work for government. How do you transition them into other industries? Where do you diversify? How do we privatize healthcare, education, public works? We have a deregulation um, work group. And how do you deregulate enough to create free and foster free and open markets? How do you create a regulatory framework that supports the development of open source protocols and freedom technology like Nostr, like Bitcoin, um, and make sure that shit coins, alternative currencies, whatever you want to call it, don't come to Suriname.
Mm.
How do you create that environment that we all got into this for, right? Where we can actually build this new system without making any of the mistakes that incentivize greed, and how can we even one of the tasks is make sure that we can open source government. We can have a corruption bounty on there that people can look for corruption in the system. If it's all in Bitcoin, salaries in Bitcoin, prices in the supermarkets in Bitcoin, everybody, like Bitcoin is the de facto currency. You can actually see how all of it is spent. You can actually automate a lot of it. So you can open source government. And one of the mandates and or instructions that I gave as well is how do you remove as much power away from the top, right? From central leadership. So how do you make me irrelevant within the shortest amount of time? Like if you look at Switzerland, for example, nobody knows. Most of the people I speak to don't have any idea who the president of Switzerland is or who the leadership of Switzerland is. Um, so you can decentralize government in a way that it actually works for the people. Combine that with Bitcoin being money, right? Because if we are successful, and it's not even if, it's when, right?
Mm.
Because the political party I'm in, the National Party of Suriname, it's the oldest party in the country. Based off of the polls, they're already guaranteed 9 seats in parliament, just based on their own members and previous votes in elections. We need to get them up to more, so we need funding. But those 9 seats, you're already in the coalition, so you're already part of parliament and government. So we can already push these policies. So it's just a matter of when, and it's a matter of whether people want me to be president. I need funding, like for any of this, right? The last time we talked, I think we talked about resin, we talked about replacing mortgages,
Mm.
um, building alternatives to banking, right? Grant Cardone launched a real estate investment fund, like he's the first, but it's not it's not the same, right? It's
Mm.
a Wall Street bro accumulating Bitcoin in his fund, same as you know as if you were to invest in a real estate investment trust and invest into MicroStrategy or Bitcoin. It's not changing the status quo for anyone. It's not changing the system. It's not anything new.
Mm. We don't want
We
Bitcoin in Wall Street. We want Bitcoin in the little guy's hands. We want Bitcoin in the hands of Bitcoin country. So we obviously want Bitcoin in the hands of Bitcoin countries. And again, like we're a Bitcoin only media company. We know how hard it is to try to run a Bitcoin only business. It's difficult. Bitcoiners don't want to part with their Bitcoin. But I think a lot of Bitcoiners, they want to see hyper Bitcoinization. They want to actually be able to live in these Bitcoin peer-to-peer communities. We want more Bitcoin presidents like you, Maya, to be incredibly honest here. So what your election's 5 months away. I want to come back to the strategic Bitcoin reserve point in a moment, but you mentioned the Geyser Fund. How else can we help put you in office in Suriname in 5 months' time? How can we help Bitcoin adoption in Suriname?
Now, I wanted to quickly interrupt today's interview to give a massive shout out to our lead sponsor, Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino is a Bitcoin banking solution that combines traditional financial services with the power of Bitcoin. Created by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners, Rhino offers a range of different services. You can buy Bitcoin, you can sell Bitcoin, you can withdraw straight to cold storage, and you can even pay other people using the Bitcoin Lightning Network. You can also purchase gift cards with sats at the click of a button, and you can even connect a multi-signature setup to Casa, all by using the Rhino application. Additionally, you can even send cash globally to your family and friends using Rhino, and soon you'll be able to pay bills, borrow money against your Bitcoin, and even save Bitcoin for your retirement, all in the one seamless application. You guys can visit rhinobitcoin.com to download Rhino today and experience the future of Bitcoin banking.
Well, to be honest, I think this is and I don't think people understand that well enough. I think our this is our shot, right, to actually separate money from state. I don't know if it'll be the only one or the last one, but the way that it looks like things are going, it does look like it's ending more in the hands of Wall Street. It does look like the things that are being developed are not focused on hyper Bitcoinization or on solving actual problems for people. It's more about making more fiat and making number go up, which is cool, I think, for everybody that's holding. They can hold into infinity and watch the dollar price go up until it's not relevant anymore. I don't know. Yeah, it's so contradictory to me. It doesn't make sense. But yeah, because you say, Bitcoiners like to hold on to their Bitcoin, but there are VCs in this space. There are uh grant providers that are, they're also like Jesus Christ, the amount of gatekeeping that goes on there as well. It's like worse than the VCs. Um, you know how hard it is to get capital as a Bitcoin only company. It's difficult to work in this space. It's not Um, it's not as well funded as it should be, and how do you help here? Yeah, I mean, it was thanks to Bitcoin Curacao that kickstarted um, most of what's happening on the Geyser Fund to support the campaign. I'm finally able to afford security, and like I did an interview yesterday where I was very much opposing our former dictator and current government, and I'm pregnant, so I'm think
Congratulations.
thank you. Um, but then I leave there thinking, I'm risking my life. I'm risking her life. I'm risking my family's lives, and it's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make because I've been in this long enough, or it'll all be worth it, I think. Um, like I'm not a billionaire like Trump. I wasn't born rich. Like, well, yeah, maybe we were born rich, but we lost everything. So I can't afford security like Bukele. So we did finally make the move to put one armed guard outside. Um, and Geyser has helped a lot. We've been able to slow start the campaign, and I mean the party has its own structures. There are 5,000 volunteers, 30,000 members countrywide. So they have 5,000 members that are going door to door. And the party's already started slow with their campaign as well. It'll ramp up in January. That's when the real campaigning starts. So we'll have events. But even the NPS, like, we don't take cartel money. We don't take cartel funding. We don't take funding from bad actors. So that makes it a lot more difficult. We have to do it with a smaller budget, even though we're one of the largest parties in the country. Um, we know that the opposition is funded by bad actors and cartels. The same people that were responsible for the murder of my dad, and that puts me in a interesting situation. It's not the only thing that's going wrong in this country. Like 4.5 years ago, when we were almost there to launch, or the other exchange was already launched. We just had to do the first issuance. The governor got locked up in a political trial, and the minister of finance fled, and the fate of this country shifted. Our fate shifted. Things have just systemically gotten worse in the last 4.5 years. Our healthcare system is on the verge of collapse. It's already collapsed in many senses. Like the NICU is closed. They announced, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago that they weren't going to be accepting patients anymore, and if the government hadn't intervened, they would already be closed. But the healthcare system is completely collapsing, and education has completely collapsed. This government has protected a rapist at one of the banks as a CEO, and I came up out against that as well on TV. But it's I myself was assaulted in Miami in 2021, so I feel particularly close to victims of abuse. It's not something you wish on anyone or you want to go through. And one in four people is or 1 in 4 women is a victim of sexual abuse or violence or sexual abuse in this country. And it's just, you can see the cultural shift that's happened in the last 4.5 years, like years after government did that. And you see like an article about a 13 or 14-year-old girl being picked up from school by some 40-year-old guy. And, she's skipping class. And then the news article reads, and this is by the police, right? That like the police issue a statement. And the focus is on the fact that she's skipping school and her parents need to, I don't know, like punish her or whatever. That's the focus. And if you read any of the comments on Facebook, it's basically that she needs to be locked up or needs to be punished. And then that's where the narrative goes. There's no structures for support for victims of abuse and sexual assault here, similar to what you have in developed countries. We don't I call them teammates, but they're not teammates. Like the political activists, we've just we've known each other for years, and we all support each other, of course. But there's no protections in place for people like us, like for security. I'm lucky. I have the Geyser Fund running, but I have other friends that are also fighting against human rights violations. Two Indians were natives were murdered by this government, just executed. The pictures went viral on social media, and nothing happened. There's no repercussions. The attorney general's in the pocket of this president, and we all know it. We all say it on TV. But there's no structures in place to help political activists to help them with legal support or help with security or funding for anything, basically. So most of it is me figuring out ways how to help people and how to structure people. Like what we're doing with the orphanages right now, you have families where kids don't eat for 3 to 4 days, and you have orphanages where they're abused and sexually abused, and they don't get food because they're underfunded by government or they're not funded at all at the moment. So um, we're supporting those. We're supporting neighborhoods where it's going really, really wrong. But um, I don't know. It's like the world really doesn't care, and it's like we can't open GoFundMe. So you can't put all these projects online on traditional fiat rails. So it's just Geyser. Um,
Is that because GoFundMe's are blocked in Suriname, or the current government blocking access for political activists and people speaking out against the regime? Why is it blocked?
no, like most apps, we're just not on there.
Hmm.
Um, you have to have a foreign person open one for you. Um, and then even then there are some restrictions, so it has to be someone in the US or in the Netherlands or in one of the jurisdictions where they are active. And then you can open like a GoFundMe. And like even with NGOs like HRF or others, it's you have to convince them to help and want to set up structure here or a fund for here, and I don't know, they haven't. Um, Geyser's the only one without gatekeepers, to be honest.
Hmm.
And it's borderless. Anyone from anywhere in the world can send funds. And like even I just posted, I think that for help to set up a solidarity fund, because I can do everything, right? And it's also a bit of a conflict of interest. It's a real conflict of interest because now I'm running in the elections and it's politics, so it's a conflict of interest if I do a fund or set up something like that. So I'm one person, I need help. And then four people volunteered, but none of them are really following up. So you need people that actually want to change the system. You need people that have the same amount of conviction and are willing to sacrifice the same amount to come here and actually do it. For some reason, people are flocking to El Salvador, but it's not even really Bitcoin country. And people get mad at me for saying that, but I'm sorry, it's not. You have a great circular economy. You have a lot of Bitcoiners down there fighting, and the president, you know, he's been orange pilled, so he has a strategy and he's buying, and that's great. But it's it's not what this was all about. You said it. It was about getting it into the hands of everyone, right? It's about giving power back to the 99%, giving power back to people like the people here that deserve help, that are completely excluded by the system and completely fucked over by the fact that the 1% in the US, the 1% in capital markets, and by their greed, by the IMF, by World Bank, by those institutions, by these centralized institutions and incentives, that we get left behind and forgotten, and we just get left to die. Like, I was talking to a 17-year-old kid, and he's a Bitcoiner, and he's one of my biggest fans here in the country, and probably one of the few that's on X. And he's in the hospital right now in Colombia, fighting for his life. And he's one of the kids that I keep doing this for, because otherwise I would have already given up, because it's really hard, especially if you don't have the resources to be able to hire people to take some of the load off. I'm working 18-hour days now, even more. I've been sleeping 5 hours a day, and I'm talking to this kid, and he says he's hanging in there, but he doesn't know if he's going to make it. And he said, if you're not rich and elite, you get left to die. And it's just sad that that's not just here, but that's it feels like I feel that way about the rest of the world.
As do I. I think that's why we're in this, to, actually give the 99% a fighting chance in this system that is, to be quite frank, the scales are tilted against the 99%. They're tilted towards the 1%. And obviously we're both in Bitcoin for the same reason. We want to empower the 99%. We want Bitcoin in the hands of more Bitcoiners around the world.
Oh.
And I mean, Maya, thank you for the very somber look behind the curtain of how difficult it actually is to try to create a Bitcoin country. Obviously, we all know our governments are corrupt in Australia and America, but governments in South America, by the sounds of it, they're obviously even more corrupt. So I know you've got to bounce here for dinner very shortly, but I think that was a nice note to end the podcast on. There's a lot of work to do if we are going to create hyper-Bitcoinization. And, I mean, that's the promise. We need to do this for the little guy. That's why I'm in it. I'm in it to help the 99%. And that's the same reason you're in it. I mean, working 19-hour days, that's crazy. And the election's still 5 months away, which is still so far away. So, Maya, this is the second time. I'm looking forward to the third. Again, leave us with any final comments or any ways that we can help you guys in Suriname push this Bitcoin dream in the right direction.
We have all the pieces in place. Everything is aligned. It looks like the universe is fucking aligned. This feels like it is, our last shot in the world to actually change things and do things differently. And get rid of the fucking politicians and
Mm.
this government fucking disease and oppose it with something that is real. And, we need help here. I need help. Like, get your fucking fiat checkbook out. If you're a whale, I don't know, reach out, help us somehow move here. It's 5 months in a year. Take a fucking sabbatical. I don't care. Anything. I don't need to point to links. I don't need to do some spiel on how to help. If you want to really help, you'll know how to find us and how to actually make a difference.
Well, I'm going to be coming down for a month in March. So, Maya, I think that's a great note to end the podcast on. Thank you so much for coming on once again, especially at a time when you are so crazy busy over there preparing for elections and the campaigns are ramping up here in a couple of weeks in January. So, we again appreciate your time. We appreciate the fighting you're doing in Suriname, putting yourself at risk and going against the system without security for a long amount of time. Like, again, it is relatively dangerous in South America. So, again, we appreciate everything you're doing for not only Bitcoiners, but the country of Suriname. So, thank you so much, Maya. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Luke.